18,000 years ago, massive glaciers locked 1/3 of the land on Earth in their icy grip. These rivers of ice gouged their way through mountains, smashed boulders to bits, and scoured areas of the Earth flat. Then temperatures began to rise. The glaciers began to retreat, exposing a changed landscape. Glaciers helped form the lakes and rich soil of the Midwest, the fjords and peaks of Patagonia, and Yosemite Valley in California. Here, the glacier bulldozed its way through the mountains, carved out a U-shaped valley, and left behind sheer cliffs like Half Dome. A glacier begins when snow begins to fall faster than it melts. As the snow accumulates weight, it compresses. The light, fluffy crystals turn into firn, a dense, grainy ice. As years go by, the weight of accumulated snow on top increases. The ice begins to move under its own weight. No speeding tickets here. The glacier moves under 1 inch per day. The bottom layer, slowed by the ground, moves less than the top. The strain cracks the ice, creating giant crevasses. Warming at the end of the last ice age reduced the Earth's glaciers, but it didn't get rid of them. Today, more than 1/10 of the land is still covered in ice, and that ice holds a wealth of information. Scientist Keith Eckelmeyer measures Columbia Glacier in Alaska yearly in order to get a jump on global climate trends. Columbia has retreated 8 miles from its terminal moraine, the pile of rubble left at the end of the glacier. As it shrinks, it calves huge icebergs off into the sea. No one knows for sure whether this is from global warming or just part of the natural cycle of temperature and ice. By studying air trapped in the ice, researchers reveal the history of Earth's climate and look past the current warmth for clues to the next ice age. Fossils are the remains of things that were once alive. Scattered across every continent, they teach us about the history of the Earth and provide evidence supporting the evolution of life. But finding a fossil isn't easy. As paleontologist Robert Bakker explains, it requires a trained eye.
The most important thing to look for when you're out digging dinosaurs is the stuff over there, in the periphery of your vision. So when you're digging dinosaurs, you've got to have a sort of 360-degree ecological vision. Look at everything. Be aware of everything.
Paleontologists travel through deserts, frozen tundra, oceans, and underground caves to uncover the remains of ancient and extinct species. The job can be risky, yet finding a fossil is only the beginning. Once it's discovered, paleontologists must carefully extract it from the ground. This excavation process can take days.
Put over there. So here's the other nostril right here. Yeah. I'm digging in the nose.
They must be cautious not to damage any remains. Once removed from the ground, the fossil is wrapped in aluminum foil and plastered burlap to keep it safe during travel. In the lab, the wrap is removed and the fossil gets a thorough cleaning. The original fossil is too heavy and fragile to display, so scientists make a reproduction. They brush rubber on the outside of the fossil to form a mold. The hardened mold is removed and filled with resin to make a copy of the original fossil. At this stage, paleontologists also create models of the missing parts. As Dr. Paul Sereno explains, they make the most out of what they have.
We had enough to wish we had more. We had enough to say we could take this and make a skeleton out of it. We hunted for that skull. We wanted the skull. We didn't have it, but we had enough of the animal, the limbs, and enough of the backbone to judge its size correctly and to get a picture of what was a very agile animal.
The reconstructed bones are now ready to piece together. They're placed onto a steel frame that provides support. The shape of the frame gives the completed skeleton the appearance of motion. Putting together a full skeleton is a tremendous challenge. With pieces missing and sometimes only fragments of a bone to work with, mistakes are not uncommon.
Well, my mother sometimes rattles my cage by saying, well, Bob, you scientists, you always make things up. You get a single bone, you build a whole animal, you got the wrong head, the wrong tail, tail on the wrong head on the wrong end. That does happen on occasion. But almost always it's another scientist another anatomist who catches the mistake and corrects it.
In most cases, paleontologists eventually get it right. With a lot of skill and a little bit of luck, the results are extraordinary. The resurrection of a species that became extinct millions of years ago.
These giant gashes in the Earth are reminders of our planet's awesome power. They are fault lines, fractures in the Earth's crust where huge slabs of rock slowly grind past each other. Most faults we can't see, but here in California, the San Andreas Fault is visible at the surface.
You can't have an earthquake without a fault. And I'm standing right now on what is perhaps the most famous fault in the world, the San Andreas Fault, that extends from Mexico down south, way up to Oregon in the north. This is one of the few places in the world where you can stand with 1 foot on one tectonic plate and one on another. In other words, this ground here is attached to New York and Iceland. The ground here is attached to Hawaii and Japan.
The San Andreas Fault sits on the boundary between the North American and Pacific plates. It's called a strike-slip fault, a place where two plates collide and try to slip past each other. As these plates move or creep in different directions, sometimes they get stuck. The longer they stay stuck, the more tension builds and the bigger the eventual quake. In other places, the plates move smoothly past each other. These areas buckle as the Earth shifts. The changes are subtle. Roger Bilham keeps track of these changes with his creep meter, a device that measures movement along the fault. A computer collects data every minute for a year. This jump in the graph tells him the Earth shifted about 5 millimeters in a couple of hours. A small shift like this can have huge consequences for us.
That might not seem much, 5 millimeters, but it's affecting a long section of the fault, maybe 5 miles long, involving millions of tons of rock. Now, it really doesn't matter here. This is a nice sort of field that aren't any people, but further north, this creep process and the things that are happening beneath the Earth are far more sinister.
The San Andreas Fault and its branches trigger more than 10,000 quakes a year. Sometimes the results are devastating. Just ask the people of Los Angeles or San Francisco. Over the last 2 decades, major quakes rocked both of these cities. Life goes on, but the risk remains. In an area this active, the next violent tremor could happen at any time.